Thank you for joining me on the podcast, Julian. Just met you in the foyer of the cinema, so we're coming in really fresh here to discover what you're all about. All I know is you're a filmmaker. That's it. So, what brings you here to the film festival then?
Well, this is my first time to Romford Horror Film Festival, but I've participated in it for about several years actually now, supplying films because I'm a filmmaker, but I'm also a sales agent.
Right. Okay.
So I represent about 150 genre films from all corners of the world. But I make films too. So I've directed about 10 features. So Romford has screened films I've directed, but they've also screened films that I'm selling and distributing.
Right. Okay. So that's interesting to be on that side of the industry as well. That's quite a unique combination, I would guess.
Yeah, it happened really out of frustration with what was happening with my films in sales and distribution.
Right. Okay.
Films that I directed,
Yes,
and I put a lot of my own money into one of the films I made. The film was called The Last Horror Movie. And I basically financed it myself, and I needed to make sure I got that money back. So the only way to do that was to sell it myself. And by that time, I'd already had 10 years of experience in seeing what happens to your films in sales and distribution. So I was able to sort of grasp.
So you had a good understanding of how that side of the industry would work.
For sure. And we were very successful with The Last Horror Movie, and other producers started to come to me with their films. They felt more comfortable coming to me rather than a sales agent because I was sort of from a producer filmmaking kind of culture and background. I wasn't a suit trying to make as much.
That's what I expect to see when if I was expecting to meet someone as a sales agent in the movie industry. I'd expect to see someone like in a suit that's not connected. That's simply interested in the finances, and that's it. But being a filmmaker, I assume that you have a love for the film as well.
Well, this is it. I understand, the blood, sweat, and tears that go into making films, and I also understand how filmmakers can be sort of pushed out of the business side, and therefore it's important to strike a better balance. I quickly learned as well, though, that the grass is always greener on the other side. It's a tough world in sales and distribution. You encounter a whole new range of problems, and often these are problems that filmmakers don't understand. So I became the interface between the filmmaker and the world of distribution. But I was always looking to play fair, and also to sort of, I suppose, when you're making films, you're always trying to do a lot with very little. It's kind of guerrilla filmmaking, and I brought a lot of that sort of approach to selling and distributing. I wasn't spending ridiculous amounts of money on my lifestyle. I was, trying to make it work by spending as little as possible, but without making a low budget reflect poorly on the value of the film.
Of course, yeah. So how does it work then when someone's made a film? Let's say I make a film, but I'm clueless about the industry, but I want to get it out there, and I come to you. What does that process kind of look like?
Well, it's quite often the films that I pick up have already been made; they're completed, but there are occasionally situations where I'll get involved at an earlier stage.
Okay.
It's harder to get a sales agent involved at an earlier stage because the sales agent has to read the script, and nobody likes reading scripts.
No, it takes time, and there's the creative freedom and license just on reading it off the page. You could read a script and not interpret it in the correct way. I guess there's a danger there of that. You could have a fantastic piece. I'm not saying you personally, but anyone could read a script and not quite fully understand what that finished thing is going to be?
Well, you might have an idea in your mind, and then the next thing you do, you need to look at the director's previous work.
Yes, so it's looking at the people rather than the piece.
Yeah. You know that there's so many elements involved, and there's just more risk involved in getting it on board of something at an earlier stage because you really don't know how it's going to turn out.
No,
you can only make an educated guess, and therefore, for the most part, films are completed. And what I'm looking for, over the years, I've built up a relationship with probably every distributor in every territory worldwide. I know the distributors that are looking to buy genre films, specifically horror films.
Right.
I know what their tastes are. I know what type of film works in their territory because it isn't the same worldwide. Therefore, when I'm looking at films, I'm looking for something where I can immediately identify which distributor is going to buy that film in each country. Quite often, say, with a lot of UK films, they're too UK centric.
Okay.
Is
that based upon, when you say that, based upon location of the film or the cast?
It's also cinematic tradition of the country in a way. I mean, I remember a Thai distributor was sniffing about Jinga films in the market, and one day he came in and he sat there and he said, "You're a British company, but you're selling horror films. This doesn't make sense. Surely these are not really horror films. They're probably, let me guess, they're dramas, aren't they? And I said, no, they're horror films. He said, okay, show me what you've got. So and this was in the early days when we just had about 4 or 5 films on our slate. We showed him the trailers for some of the films, and he kind of laughed afterwards. He said, yeah, they're dramas. I'll come back next year when you've got something a little bit more genre to sell me.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's that was an education because then you realize that as a filmmaking culture and an industry, we're living in our own bubble.
Yes.
If we want to think about making films for a worldwide audience, they shouldn't be driven by dialogue. They need to be driven by other elements of mainly action.
And are we talking specifically about horror here?
Yeah. I use the word genre because it's a broader term. So that would also be thriller, science fiction, fantasy, action, anything that isn't drama or comedy. I mean, drama and comedy rely on cast. You cannot sell a drama and a comedy without cast.
Yes.
Whereas with the other genre, with horror and with action and
so when we say cast, are we talking about A-list, getting names involved? A-listers, names
don't need to be A-list. They just
but known
They
names.
just need to be associated with films that the audience in that country would immediately recognize as being, like for example, I see a lot of low budget genre films coming out of Canada where there's a cameo by Michael Ironside.
Okay.
And they've got him in for a day, and they probably paid him about $10,000. And everybody has seen a Michael Ironside film. They've seen Starship Troopers. Yeah. So his face on the poster or his name on the poster breaks the ice.
Right. Okay. So in making movies, if you want to make it in the business, these are things that you need to be considering. Yeah.
For sure. I mean, it's like with horror, you can make a really violent horror film, and you're going to sell it to Germany, but you're not going to sell it to any of the Islamic territories. You're not going to sell it to Latin America. The types of horror that work in those territories are more supernatural, spooky, jump scare, suspense. But if it's too nasty, if it's too violent, then it's immediately a pass. So you have to sort of build up an awareness of the sensibility of each market.
Okay. Is there such a film that does cover all of the markets then?
Films with cast.
Films with cast.
Yeah, because then there's a built-in audience. The audience are coming to see the actor or the actress. But in terms of right now, what's working is more the supernatural. It used to be that Germany, Japan, the US, UK were the key markets for theatrical, and now in those territories, these films are predominantly going straight to VOD. The theatrical markets now are Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, Mexico, Vietnam, Cambodia, Malaysia, Indonesia, Russia, would you believe? In these territories, small independent horror film can go out on thousands of screens theatrically.
Is it possible in the movie industry, in the movie business, to make something that's creatively brilliant and wonderful, and not take these things into consideration, like cast, like what the current themes are, the different territories?
It is possible, but if you do something wonderfully creative, then chances are what you're doing is kind of elevated horror. And you're going to be relying on A-list festival play. Okay. You want to open in Sundance, Toronto, Tribeca, film festivals in North America. But even then, you're still in the ghetto. You need to find a way to get out of the ghetto and get to as wide an audience as possible. So look at an elevated horror like Substance. That has Demi Moore. And that's the game changer.
Yes, yeah. Having that name associated changes everything.
Yeah. But then you've got the French horror films like Titane and Raw. The French language, that's a big obstacle. But they're so good that they not only were they selected for competition in Cannes, but they won. And that's the other way to crack the market
is through the awards.
Yeah. Right, but the awards from a handful of festivals,
because there's a lot of festivals happening with all different genre types all over the world, and some are really easy to get into, and some are really difficult to get into, and some of them cost quite a bit of money as well, don't they?
Yeah, well,
so then you've got to consider that in your filmmaking.
You do. I mean, that's one thing good about having a sales agent, because a sales agent can get films into festivals without the submission fee.
You would guide that then as well, would you?
Yeah, I mean, I know every festival director, not everyone, but the ones that matter, and I can make sure that the film, when it's submitted, gets towards the top of the pile. I can't guarantee selection, but I can guarantee that it gets seen by who it needs to be seen by. I do wonder about festivals that have so many submissions, and it's not possible for them to
view them all. Yeah.
So therefore, there's going to be some filtering process, and a sales agent is in a way that filtering process. So when I suggest a film to a festival director or programmer, they immediately are going to be thinking, well, they watch hundreds of films before they select one to sell. So that's a faster way for us to to go through the process. And they'll have an opinion of me as well, and whether they think I'm that I have an eye, and that I know what I'm talking about. And sometimes, I do, and sometimes I don't.
Yeah, and so how have you built that reputation and that level of trust? How has that worked for you? How have you pulled that together?
By handling some significant films. It's you don't always get the films that you want, but occasionally you'll get something that is going to elevate you. In the eyes of others.
So it's based upon what you've achieved in the past.
Yeah,
your accreditations essentially.
Yeah. I mean, when I think it was 2010, which is about 4 years after we started, we picked up some very impressive films. We were the sales agent for a Serbian film, for example. We did the first 2 Israeli horror movies, Rabies and Big Bad Wolves. And when you're coming into the market with films like that, you're effectively the talk of Cannes, and nobody knows who you are, so they're wondering who you are. And so it's really the films, and plus, I think the distributors are in the same boat. They have too many films to watch. I remember one conversation with a French distributor. He said the most films he'd ever watched in one day was 40.
Wow.
And I said, how's that possible? He said, well, I watched the first 10 minutes, and if I'm not engaged, then I switch off and move on to the next one. And then he said, but anyway, I only buy from my friends. And that sort of sums up the way the business works.
And I guess that's happening a lot in a lot of creative industries. We buy from people, and people that we know. Yeah. People that, like I said before, you built this trust. Yeah. So people that we learn to trust. Yeah. So I guess it can be hard for new people coming into the industry. So would you have any advice for someone, a new filmmaker then? For what would you say is the first part of the industry that they need to be cracking to make it in the business?
Well, how do you make a good film? You make a good film by writing a good script. And if the script's going to be good, then you really need a good idea to begin with. I mean, not all films are made because somebody's got a good idea. For every 10 films, chances are there's only one that has a good idea. I mean, my most successful film as a filmmaker is probably The Last Horror Movie. And I shot that for £60,000 on a mini DV. And it's a video diary of a serial killer. A little bit like Man Bites Dog, Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer kind of vibe. But it was a serial killer that uses a video rental to lure his next victim.
Right, okay.
So he records his video diary over the top of a horror movie he's rented from the video store. Okay. He returns it to the video store and waits for the next person to rent it, and then they become his next victim. So that's a good idea. We just needed a good script then to sort of package with the good idea, which we got. I mean, I didn't feel I could write it myself, but I had a friend who's a doctor of philosophy, who has a very dark sense of humor, and is very kind of satirical in his thinking. I got him to write the script, and he delivered a really good script. And then we got a great actor to play the killer in the film, Kevin Howarth. So, it was, the stars were aligning, Yes. This felt like it was going to work. And it did, we ended up getting a theatrical release through Tartan Films in the UK. It was the first theatrical release by Fangoria in the US. So this was like, a mini DV film that I shot for 60,000 quid.
Yes. Yeah.
But it was just a good idea.
And from that good idea, you're able to make your money back and a bit more. You're able to make a business, a profitable business from
well, we sold it worldwide for $500,000.
Wow.
Yeah. So we did make a profit. And then, that meant that I could then put that money into my next film, which was Summer Scars. Summer Scars was a dark coming-of-age thriller. More drama-centric in its, it's not really a horror film.
Yes, yeah.
And therefore it was going to be a much harder sell, and we ended up getting 2 BAFTA awards for that. So it got some good recognition for the writing. I think we made it for 150,000 and we sold it worldwide for about 120. So we lost money on that one.
Right. Yeah. I guess with any of these creative things that we're doing, we're not always going to win, are we, financially?
No.
Sometimes we might lose financially, but win creatively, or and the other way around.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's why you have the studio system. How do you make a successful film? You make 7 of them and hope that one is going to be successful.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's a It's kind of throwing the stuff out there, isn't it, and seeing what sticks.
Yeah.
In some respects.
But you do build up a sort of an idea of with Last Horror Movie for example, once you know that works, and the tendency is to do a sequel.
Yeah. And you do, and particularly in horrors, you see a lot of that.
Yeah.
When we briefly spoke out there outside about the Winnie the Pooh, and of course they've got a number of sequels and spin-offs lined up from that because it worked. Yeah, it worked once. But then I also think with that sometimes some things are clearly a one-off, and I can see with that Winnie the Pooh horror film that was of just that moment. They were the first person people to do something new. Mm-hmm. And now that everyone's copying and everyone else is following that thing, I don't see it going much further. Do you? Do you see these things going much further?
No, they don't. But they do carve out a little niche in the market. I mean, if you think of Asylum films with their Sharknado franchise,
they were quite popular, weren't they? Yeah.
What they were doing, mockbusters. So they would look what the studios were making, and they would make their low budget versions first. Yes. So they'd get into the market maybe just about the right time that the big blockbusters were coming in as well. And I had this with I was selling a film called Hansel and Gretel Get Baked. The other title was Hansel and Gretel and the 420 Witch, and it had cast, and the budget was about $2 million, but it was competing against the big studio Hansel and Gretel, and the Asylum Hansel and Gretel. So it was not.
It's easy to kind of get. So whilst there's a wave for these things or a season, it's easy to get lost in that if you're not careful.
Yeah. You're guaranteed when you come up with an idea and you're making a film that somebody's making something very similar at the same time.
So we're in this era at the moment where there's a lot of copyrighted material becoming public domain. Going back to the Winnie the Pooh thing, and we've got Popeye, and we've got some superheroes coming available in the next 10 years. I think we're only 10 years away from Superman entering public domain. Yeah. So is that something that opens up new revenue for the business, for the industry?
For sure, because what this is a recognizable brand that it's the equivalent.
There's an audience there already.
Yeah, it's equivalent of having a star in your film, but the star is the character that everybody knows, and that's kind of why it worked.
Do you think these things will get too diluted as everyone tries to jump on board? I can foresee a time 10 years from now, Superman's available. Every filmmaker that's got a bit of a budget is going to be going, I want to make a Superman movie. Yeah.
Well, it'll be,
and they're not all going to be good.
It'll become it'll become a subgenre, and think of found footage.
Yes.
And when I did Last Horror Movie, I was very much inspired by the Blair Witch Project, and not long after I'd done Last Horror Movie, there were so many found footage films coming into the market, and now the market is awash with them because they're easy to make. Not necessarily easy to make, but cheap to make.
Cheaper to make. You can avoid some of the big technical costs that involve with movie making.
But now, if somebody comes to me with a found footage film, I pass because I know that distributors are going to pass. I mean, I just came back from the market in Berlin, and there were some filmmakers that came to me with a found footage pinhole camera film,
right?
And it's Victorian, so it's like the first found footage film ever made. I haven't seen it yet. It's in sepia.
Yeah, and this goes back to you saying about a good idea.
Yeah, you've got to have something new. You've got to have an angle that hasn't been done before. And with Last Horror Movie, the angle was you rent this film and you die, and the angle of this pinhole camera found footage is that it's the technology. We haven't seen that technology used to make a film. Whether it can sustain feature length, I don't know. It's just going to be too much of it. I suspect it's really just a novelty for film festivals. I don't see it finding its way into the market, but it was interesting.
Can the ideas be too new for the business at this kind of level, this kind of indie filmmaker level? Can an idea be too fresh?
Well, no. I think that the market can be quite conservative. They're looking, if something's successful, they're looking for something very similar to sort of compound upon what was successful the year before. So you do get a lot of copycat kind of filmmaking. If you come into the market with something completely fresh, then I suppose there's no proof that it's going to be commercial. But then you're going to be relying on the festivals who are not commercially driven.
Yeah,
or hopefully not, who are looking for distinct, unique voices. So if your film is really fresh and is good, then maybe it's going to premiere in Sundance and win an award in Sundance, and it'll get picked up by Netflix or Amazon or one of the streamers.
Yes, yeah. This is a really interesting, because I talk to a lot of just the filmmaker side. This is a really interesting side for me, the business side of things. So, do you see yourself? Do you go back to filmmaking as well, or are you just concentrating on this side of?
It's a struggle. It's a struggle
because I can guess that this would take up a lot of time.
Too much time.
Yes, yeah.
And
time business.
Yeah, and I have 150 films now, and some of them have passed their initial license, so they're coming back into the market. So I just have.
And it's I can imagine it's quite a strategic and tough job to do, to get out there and market and sell films.
Yeah. You do have to understand every aspect of the process, and be able to. I'm getting more involved now, actually, with the completion of films. Like there's an Italian horror film called The Well, with Lauren Lavira from Terrifier 2 and 3 in, and I picked that up for sales, and I have a long-standing relationship with the director, and I ended up working with the director and cutting 20 minutes out of the film before we actually brought it to the market. And I'm about to do the same thing with a big Serbian Mad Max film called Sword of Vengeance, and I've done that previously with another Italian horror movie called The Ghost of Monday.
How do you think that makes the filmmakers feel when you're coming in with that business angle look on the film, and you're cutting some of their work up?
Yeah, it's.
I can imagine it must be quite tough for them.
Being a filmmaker myself. It's not necessarily a business angle. It's actually a filmmaking angle.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it's being more succinct with the storytelling, and getting rid of exposition, and sort of saving the filmaker quite often from embarrassment. I've been around for a while. I've made 10 films myself. Darklands, which is screening here at Romford now, I did a 4K restoration during lockdown, and I couldn't help but cut 10 minutes out because I'm older, I'm wiser, and I'd lived with that film for 25 years, and there's stuff in it that really embarrasses me, and I've got rid of it. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So I can bring that to the table when I'm.
You sound like you're in a really unique position.
There's not a lot of director sales agents.
No,
there's one or two, but actually operating in the market now, I'm one of the few.
So sometimes what I like to do with this podcast is go on a bit of a hypothetical, and if you was to be able to go back to those days when you was making that movie Darklands, and knowing what you know now. Not just cutting bits out of the film that's just extra bits of fluff, if you like. What advice would you give to yourself to make that movie more successful than it perhaps was? It was a very ambitious film for £500,000. And it's being shown at a film festival today, all these years later. Yeah. There's still an audience for it, so clearly. Yeah.
The film was quite successful. Roger Corman was going to pick it up for distribution in the US, and in the end didn't, because the producer couldn't work out a deal with him, which is really frustrating. And the film ended up not getting a US release until I took over. and 12 years later got the film into the US market, but by that time it was too late. But I suppose what I'm saying is that the film was too ambitious for the budget that I had, for the time and the resources, and also to a degree my experience as a director. So I wasn't as in control of the film as I would be now. But you live and learn. I mean, this is how you improve as a filmmaker. I've recently been in situations where I'm directing a film and I'm not in control, but that's because of other factors. Because control has been taken away from me. And
in what way would that happen? In what way would a film be taken away from you? Is it through finances? It's for the relationship with the boss, with the money man. With this film in particular, it was called Daddy's Girl. We were shooting it in Tbilisi, Georgia. Finance was out of India, when we decided to make it, was based on a script I'd had in my bottom drawer for 10 years. That I hadn't written the script. It was brought to me by my manager or my agent, this opportunity came to make a feature, and they needed a script. So that was the closest thing I had to being ready to shoot, and they went for it. When I actually got to Tbilisi 4 weeks before we started shooting, they said, "Oh, well, we've just read it, and there's no way we can make this. So we'll need to rewrite it." They didn't have a writer, so I had to rewrite it. So I spent 4 weeks when I should have been in pre-production, writing a script almost from scratch. And so by the time we knew what we were making, it was 3 days before we started shooting. And then from that point on, we were playing catch up, and we never really caught up. Everything was flying by the seat of our pants. Did that help? I hear often that helps with the filmmaking process, that it's not too structured, that you're working things out as you go along.
I mean, think of Apocalypse Now, and not knowing the ending. You can do that, but it's risky.
And I bet a scary ride to be on.
It's too stressful. Yeah, I mean, way too stressful. I would never. I used to have anxiety dreams about arriving on set, and I hadn't read the script. I didn't know what I was going to be directing. I've always had those kind of dreams. This film was an anxiety dream that became real.
Wow.
Every day in a weird part of the world, in the Caucasus, working
and
with.
You don't actually need that.
No, I mean, filmmaking is hard enough. Why make it harder? I mean, I managed to get through it. I managed to deliver, something that is a result.
What could you have done anything differently? Avoid it of being so stressful?
No. It was just the people I was collaborating with. That's the way they make films.
Yes.
They. I'm told. In India, you best laid plans. It's like you can plan everything, and then you'll turn up and they'll want to do something different.
There's a big Hollywood movie, Bollywood movie.
Yeah.
Being made in London recently, and a lot of actor friends of mine have been on this Bollywood movie and said how much it's like that, and how much it's been quite all over the place compared to normal British filmmaking. And very stressful.
Oh yeah.
Was what I was hearing from them.
I mean, there were some good ideas that came out, randomly from the producer. I was locked into the script. See, I didn't have the objective view.
Yes, yeah.
So occasionally he would pop in with something, and quite often it worked well. So it does help to have that objective eye.
Yes.
but it's just I do think filmmaking is, think of Hitchcock, you know, you and storyboarding and all of that. I don't storyboard, actually. For me, that's a little bit too controlling. But
to have a strong plan.
Yeah. You've got to know what you're doing. And
not 3 days before.
No, because so much of it is learning what you want and communicating that to your crew.
Yes.
And when you've got crew coming to you asking you what you want all the time, and you know you haven't had time to think about it. I mean, we would turn up on locations, and because we were the story was set in the US, and we were shooting it in Tbilisi. So we were looking for locations that looked like the US. They were very hard to find. And I found a motel that looked like an American motel.
Yes.
So I thought, well, okay, we'll shoot there. And when we turned up, we discovered it was a brothel.
Right.
Right. And the owners were not happy with us turning up with lots of cameras. You know? So there's no way that we could film there. And we had a big unit, you know, with honey wagons and, you know, hundreds of people, you know, parking and So I'd from the airport driving into Tbilisi, I'd seen some railway sidings, and the railway trucks looked like what you might see in the Midwest somewhere, you know. And I just thought, okay, well, that kind of looked very Americana. Let's go there, and it's away from everywhere, you know, so it's something that we'll probably be able to control. And we went and shot the scene there, and it worked, you know. So I was proud of myself.
So you got to be adaptable in this industry, haven't you?
Yeah.
You got to be. There's got to be. You know, have your best laid plans, but be flexible for change at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. That's because you can lock yourself into a.
This is how you want it, but it won't necessarily work and plan out like that.
Yeah, or it might, but it'll just be a little bit lifeless.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing with me today, Julian. I really do appreciate some really unique insights from you there. As we wrap up this conversation, then one final question that comes to mind: what advice would you give to a filmmaker that wants to approach you and wants your help in selling a film?
Well, I respond to visual ideas. You know, so if somebody sends me a script, chances are I'm not going to have time to read it. If they send me an outline or a synopsis, then I will. But I really like sizzle reels or anything visual that I can look at to get in, you know, to sort of encourage me to actually sit down and read something. That's important. Maybe also, you know, an example of the director's earlier work, you know, a short film or something, just so that I can get a sense of the filmmaking kind of technique and style and quality. I do find screenplays really difficult to sort of I have to read them 2 or 3 times before I can have anything sensible to say about them. And I really don't have that many hours in the day. No.
A screenplay isn't like reading a book, is it? It doesn't give you all the direction in there, and you don't know where the director. That's the kind of the point of the film director, is to guide where it's going to go. So that help. It sounds like a really good idea to give you like a sizzle reel, to give you like a taste of what this thing is going to be. And what about if they've made the film? Then the film's finished, it's done, it's ready to go, it's ready for an audience. What then?
Show me a trailer. Because I mean, I'll watch the film. Chances are I will. But if the trailer grabs me, I mean, I'm selling a film at the moment from Argentina where I was grabbed by the trailer, and then when I watched the film, I was like going, "Ooh, kind of 50% lives up to the trailer." And
well, we get that with big Hollywood blockbusters, don't we?
Yeah.
They often sell a film with the 15-second trailer, and you're like, "Wow, that's going to be amazing." You sit down and no, that was the film.
But I was able to go back to them and suggest some changes, and which they took on board, and because I had, you know, thinking like a sales agent, you know, because I had a good trailer, I came up with a good poster, even though the film doesn't quite deliver. I've got the key elements I need to engage a buyer. So I changed the title of the film. The original title was Charming, and it's a horror film. So I thought Charming, no, that's a romantic comedy. So I called it the Doll Maker. So and
little tweaks like that can make a big difference.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to find you, they want to get in touch with you, they're seeking your advice, your help, how do they do that?
Best way to do it is send me an email. I'm terrible at social media. People contact me on social media all the time, and I have a view that social media is for social media. It's not for it's not for business. If you want to engage with me business wise, then send me an email.
Great, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing, and also if anyone has been watching or listening to this conversation, we appreciate you for joining us.
Yep, thank you.
Cheers. Bye bye.